All right, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with our webinar presentation today. Appreciate all of you in attendance, and I appreciate the folks at IIG for allowing us to host this discussion today. We have a lot to cover, so we'll try to get that done in about 40 minutes, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Russ Groff, and I work with a company called Netstock. And at Netstock, we work with small and medium-sized businesses across North America and, for that matter, around the globe. These are typically inventory-based businesses that are distributors, manufacturers, retailers, e-tailers, e-commerce companies, amongst others. And for most, the value of their inventory is the largest asset on their balance sheet. And of course, it's really core to their business. Excuse me. So how do most of these small and medium-sized businesses manage this critical asset? Well, certainly to some degree with the use of their ERP or accounting software, but also often with spreadsheets. And these are increasingly complex efforts, and Excel is really not designed for this purpose. And so you might ask yourself, why is this so prevalent? Why are firms doing that? And first, before we dive into that in more detail, let me give this just a little bit of context. When we use the phrase inventory management, we usually first think of what's really what I would call inventory control. Now, this is more the handling of the physical product, the shipping, receiving, physical counts, bin management perhaps, often entails the use of barcoding and scanners and so forth. And so this component of inventory management certainly does a great job of telling us what product is where and in what quantities. And clearly that's important. You've got to know what you have and where it is, and all those kinds of things it's critical. But it's not the whole story. And it doesn't really tell us if it's the right quantity of product at the right place at the right time. So it's really that flip side of the same inventory management coin that we sometimes call inventory replenishment or optimization. And that's the function that many firms are using today, using Excel today to try to accomplish that goal. So, what about the accounting and ERP software that's in use by all these smaller, medium-sized businesses, right? Why are they not using just that? Well, and it's a fair question, but it turns out that most accounting products, especially for the small, medium-sized market, simply don't do a great job of handling all the aspects of replenishment and optimization. They're usually missing some key functionality. Oftentimes that's a forecasting tool, or what's there is kind of hard to use or hard to understand, so it tends to be underutilized. And so that leaves a gap that Excel is often used to fill, and for some seemingly pretty good reasons. We know that Excel is generally available to everybody in the company. And when I used to say Excel, by the way, that might mean Google Sheets or some other spreadsheet tool as well, but clearly Excel dominates the marketplace in that space. And so people are familiar with it, relatively easy to use, at least at a basic level. Navigation's familiar. And some folks can actually manage some pretty complex calculations. We've all seen Excel wizards in our firms that can create some pretty amazing worksheets and do some cool stuff. And because it's generally on everybody's computer, it doesn't cost anything, right? It's a freebie. Well, that's probably a good question to ask. Is it really cost free? You may not pay much, out of pocket to actually license Excel or make use of what's already on your desktop, but there certainly are some hidden costs that we'll address that are very real and could be substantial. So you could actually think of Excel in this case as more of a development tool or a platform, right? You get this blank form, and now you get to make it do what you want, and it's great at doing some really cool calculations and analysis. There's no question about that. Business wouldn't be able to survive today without an Excel spreadsheet doing a lot of work for them. But we would argue that spreadsheets are really not well suited for the specific challenge of inventory management. It's certainly not designed for that particular purpose. And we all know that errors are very prevalent in almost all spreadsheets. Some of them certainly very minor, but some are quite critical, and oftentimes they go unrecognized. You might have an error in a formula in a worksheet that then creates an answer that might be only slightly off base, so it's not so noticeable. Then it cascades to the next calculation and the next calculation, and before you know it, you've got some pretty significant challenges with the data that businesses are tending to be relying on. So clearly, excuse me, clearly better inventory management is critical and very important. So let's understand the impact on firms when inventory is not optimized. This results in excess stock. It can result in stocking out and wasted time and effort. When we work with clients around the globe, and especially here in North America, it's not uncommon for us to identify 15, 20% or more in excess stock sitting in a warehouse. So if a firm has even only $1 million worth of inventory value on the books, that means that perhaps as much as $200,000 or more of working capital is tied up in this excess stock. And that's capital that could be put to use elsewhere in the business to drive profits, to make other investments. In addition, that results in about $50,000 a year in carrying costs. The typical industry expertise on carrying costs for inventory is anywhere between 15, 20, 25% in some cases. So even if we took a 20% number in the middle, that's $50,000 per year of hard costs that are applied to that excess inventory. Things like taxes, insurance, shrinkage, obsolescence. Right, you've got to count it, move it around. You pay rent on that warehouse that it's taking up space in. So it's a significant out-of-pocket cost, as well as the opportunity cost of having that working capital tied up. But even worse than having excess is actually running out of product when a customer has a need. Right, when there's demand and you can't fill that demand, you not only risk losing that sale if the customer goes elsewhere to find what he needs, but if he has a positive experience with your competitor to make that purchase, you may actually lose that customer altogether. Maybe not the first time, but if it happens a second or a third time, all of a sudden your customers are starting to think maybe they could get better service elsewhere. And so that's a real challenge. And then the third thing is you find yourself, if you're the buyer or planner in an organization, you find yourself putting out fires, expediting orders, using all kinds of manual processes to manage this, using Excel again to try to manage some of the data. And so this is really critical stuff. And it's why firms are using Excel or any tool. We find all kinds of different techniques that are in use in companies to try to solve the problem. But again, even small challenges with your Excel spreadsheets can cascade to cause some really large problems. And better inventory management is really all about data, right? It needs to be accurate. That's first and foremost, which means it requires accurate stock balances, sales data, purchase histories. You also need to understand open purchase orders and sales orders, so what commitments there are against those inventory items, shipments and receipts, transfers of inventory if you've got multiple warehouses. So clearly there's a lot of transactions going on in the background. And all those accounting and ERP systems that I referenced just a few slides earlier generally do a great job of capturing all that data, right? Our teams spend all day entering orders, invoices, shipping, receiving product, and all those different transactions, and all that data is very nicely stored and organized in the accounting application, and it's doing what it's designed to do. So if you're using Excel now to do inventory optimization, you need to figure out how to grab that data and dump it out into Excel. It's not easy to do, but it's doable, and many of you are doing that today. The data that you need is typically in 7, 8, maybe 10 different files within the ERP database. And of course, when you upgrade versions of either the accounting system or perhaps Excel itself, you need to review any changes in the data structures, make any adjustments in functionality. So you've always got to stay on top of that. And so that can be pretty time consuming, but again, doable. But as we discussed, again, many spreadsheets have errors in them, and the more complex they become, the more challenges and the more data you're moving around and importing and slicing and dicing, the more prevalent, the more common and error prone are those spreadsheets. So certainly something to think about in terms of an accuracy issue. But besides the accuracy, there's also a control issue, right? Who's in charge? And who else can make changes or updates to that spreadsheet? Does anybody else really understand what the outputs mean, what the various inputs are? So there certainly are some control challenges related to that spreadsheet. And what happens if the manager of that spreadsheet, and the designer and primary user of that tool is out sick or on vacation, or even worse, maybe leaves the company? Right. Just a few weeks ago, I was on the phone with a company in Wisconsin that we were talking to, and this guy told me about that he hired this really smart kid. I think he was still in college, and he was absolutely an Excel wizard. Really understood statistics and regression analysis, and he built this monster spreadsheet. That was his word for it, monster, for ordering replenishment of stock. And of course, now that whiz kid's no longer there, and no one really has a clue how to use what it was that he built. And we've got a quote here on the screen from a blogger, and he talks about, which I think is really resonates with everybody, that in every organization there exists at least one spreadsheet, and it's probably more, that's very critical, usually gets emailed around every morning, and it's almost always called something master.xls, right? So if you've got one of those floating around, somebody's in control of that master spreadsheet, and it probably bears thinking that through as to, is that creating any sort of additional risk for you as a company? And then beyond the accuracy issue and the control issue is the issue of synchronization. There are additional planning inputs that need to be brought into play, such as vendor lead times and so forth. And not only that, but from a synchronization standpoint, it's about timing of when you dump the data. So maybe you dump stock balances at 9 o'clock this morning, and it takes a few minutes for that to process. You take a look at it, make sure everything looks good. You get interrupted, and then you bring in the open POs at 9:30 or 10 o'clock and do some more work with that, and then you bring in some more files. So as you go through that process, even if that takes you an hour or so, the question then becomes, how accurate is that data? Because it's probably not properly synced. We know that in the ERP or accounting application, there's constantly updating of transactions going on. And so again, even those small differences from one file to the next can now create some accuracy issues that cascade, especially if we use that data in calculations that flow down line at other worksheets. So synchronization is clearly a challenge. And all of this stuff, the control issues, the accuracy, the synchronization, all of that certainly prevents you from getting a really clear, full accuracy and understanding of what's going on in your inventory application. And then beyond that, there are some other real world complexities, right? So things, as I mentioned earlier, things like vendor lead times and product classification. I imagine we've all done some classic ABC analysis to identify our most important items or product classes in our systems. If we've got 1,000 SKUs, we know that not all 1,000 SKUs need to be treated the same. And so product classification, if done correctly, can really help you develop proper policies and service targets, fill rates, and so forth. So ideally, you want to have an environment that helps you accommodate that. So we can slice and dice the data a little bit in Excel, do some sorting, do some calculations, maybe use the 80-20 rule to get that classification done. But then we've also got these other factors, right? What's the right safety stock calculation? What's my reorder cycle? What's my replenishment cycle? What are my EOQs? And so all these different data inputs that typically need to be resident now in that one master or monster spreadsheet, as we refer to it, and have that available for you. And so let's assume you got all that nailed, right? You figured all that out, and you've got perfectly accurate and well-synchronized data in your inventory spreadsheet. So first of all, that's a big assumption, but nice job. If you've been able to accomplish that, that's great. Most firms really don't even get to that point. But let's say you got it all right. And so now guess what? Business keeps changing, right? Your needs change, and your spreadsheet needs to evolve. Your data gets larger, more transactions, bigger files. There may be more timing issues. Maybe you have multiple locations and different time zones. Maybe you have multiple warehouses. You have new users that come on board that need to be accommodated. Maybe there's actual process changes in the organization, the way that you receive inventory or move product around maybe changes. And now you have to think about, does that impact the spreadsheets that you've created to manage that? Maybe there are special rules for certain items or classes of items that you want treated differently. Maybe some revised safety stock calculations for those different sets of items. And there's even more. So it's just really asking a lot of Excel and its users to keep track of all those different complexities. And then your organization may have some unique circumstances due to the type of product or your type of customers, what your suppliers are like, where they're located, lead time calculations, and all these different things that come into play. So beyond the typical ones, your firm may actually have some unique factors that need to come into play. And some of the other things that we see, for example, other potential complications are that if you have multiple warehouses, think about how those purchasing decisions get made. Do each of those subsidiary or secondary locations make their own direct purchases from vendors, or are they being resupplied by a central warehouse and all of their demands need to roll up to the central location to then issue purchase orders to suppliers? So that hub and spoke warehouse kind of configuration can add some complexity. What about new SKUs? How often does that occur in your business? Maybe you're a type of business that adds lots of new products all the time. Are those replacing old products that we could, utilize those old forecasts and sales histories to kind of get a profile for what to expect going forward? Or do we need to create new forecasts based on sales projections? Do we need to monitor that? So new items can be a challenge. What about bills of materials? If you're doing any sort of kitting or light assembly work, or even especially if you're a full-blown manufacturing operation, you've got to understand the component demand under those finished goods that make up that bill of materials. And so as I forecast sales for a finished good, have that explode down through the various levels of my bill so that I have components on hand. There's nothing worse than running out of product that holds up a production line. So certainly some additional complexities there to manage. So keep in mind, so whether you're using a spreadsheet, you're using your ERP or some combination, some third-party application perhaps, the whole point of this is to create the optimal order. It's all about getting the perfect optimized order recommendations so that you can make those decisions and those purchases. And what really is an optimal order? It means the result of optimal order recommendations is that you get the lowest possible inventory value with the highest possible service to your customers. That's how we would define optimal, and that's the nirvana, right? That's the goal. Have just enough to meet the need, but not too much that's costing you excess dollars. So optimal inventory levels are really always based on sound calculations of a safety or buffer stock. This is really the key component to making sure that I've got optimal levels. And safety stock has some different components and factors that go into it. It can actually be a fairly complicated calculation. And again, it's not likely that any spreadsheet is really going to get that right, or at least not as accurate as it could be through other methodologies. So, so I think we get it, right? I've just spent the last 15 minutes or so talking about all the challenges, some of which may be obvious, some of which not so obvious. But probably if you're out there listening to this and using a spreadsheet, you're probably shaking your head at a number of these things, that this is a real challenge. There's no question that it makes sense to try, right? It's available, it's there, it's useful, it's a pretty flexible tool. But once you really get into it and really think it through, it's clearly full of lots of problems, challenges, speed bumps, if you will. And so what's the solution, right? If we've come to the conclusion that this is a problem, then what's the solution? And I think the answer is a true inventory management system. In other words, a software application that really understands and resolves all these complexities that we've just discussed. So an inventory management system, or an IMS, if we, those of us in software like to use acronyms, is really a software application that understands all these complexities. And as we've, all the things that we've discussed here plus more. And ideally, it would easily integrate with your ERP or accounting application and remove a lot of those manual, time-consuming, and error-prone processes. That's really what we're after with this external additional application that is specifically designed, and its whole purpose in life is to help you manage inventory optimization and replenishment. So these typically look like some sort of an inventory dashboard, give you some sort of access to good information, good visibility as to a status check, if you will, of what's going on in the inventory. That dashboard would include some key performance indicators or KPIs to identify some trends. Obviously, what you're looking to accomplish is that your excess inventory and overall inventory is declining over time, and that your fill rates or customer service levels, ability to meet the demand from your customers, is trending upwards over time. So you want to have some visuals of those kinds of results from all the effort. And ideally, you get some exception-based reports. What we've identified in our time in this marketplace is that the 80-20 rule typically applies. If you've got, again, 1,000 SKUs as an example, probably 800 of them may be in decent shape. They're between your mins and maxes, at the moment and for the foreseeable future. So life is good, and I don't need to spend any time or attention or effort thinking about those 800. But it's the other 200, the other 20%, and maybe these are some of my most important items, are the ones that are really the challenge. And so I need to be able to focus my attention through some exception-based reporting and alerting, if you will, to make sure that I get to exactly those items that are causing the most pain. And then we'll have, by resolving those issues, we'll have the most positive impact on the business. And all that really helps you do some policy setting, right? Understand what's the nature of the inventory, what does it look like, what's the status, and what policies do I need to have in place for fill rates and replenishment cycles and so forth that make the most sense so that I can have a good consistent management system in place. So of course, NetStock, that's what we do, right? We have an application that is an IMS, it's an inventory management system, and it's specifically designed for the small, medium-sized business market. It's cloud-based. We do the installations remotely. It operates on a subscription model, so it's a very low point of entry from a price standpoint. Monthly subscription price point is very affordable, and it allows you the opportunity to cancel at any time. So you can load it up, play with it, work with it. Maybe it meets your needs for a period of time. Business changes, you can cancel. You're not locked in for a long-term contract. It's typically a month-to-month type of environment. So the great news is that really the game has changed for small and medium-sized businesses. Big firms could always afford systems in this marketplace. They could had the manpower and the expertise. They had the budgets, and they could go after building custom applications even. Those could be year-long deployments and 6 or 7 figure type projects. But the big guys could always do that, and it's important enough for them to have done that. And in fact, the founders of NetStock all come from that big enterprise background, where they built and deployed very complex and highly customized optimization tools for some large multinational firms. Again, the great news is that today that level of power and sophistication is now available to smaller firms, small, medium-sized companies, at a very affordable level and with really great ease of deployment and ease of use. And this is really a huge breakthrough. I mean, it's a game changer that can really mean finally the end of using spreadsheets for this purpose. And that's really one of our purposes in getting together today, is to let you know that there is a better way. So we've got a couple of quotes here from a few of our customers, just to give you a feel. This gentleman here, Joe, gives us a nice quote. You'll notice he says that is a perfect example. He came out of a spreadsheet model, which he described as being awkward and inaccurate. And now with NetStock, which, by the way, in the Sage world is branded as Sage Inventory Advisor. So you see this reference to Sage Inventory Advisor, or SIA. That is the NetStock product that's branded for Sage. So he's telling us here that the new system has enabled a much more efficient materials management process. Another quick quote here from Justin here. One of his comments to us when we followed up with him was that, in just one of his warehouses, which he has several, he has now decreased his excess stock by over $300,000 in just 6 months or so of using the application. So that kind of return on investment makes for some pretty simple math, as he indicates here. So a great ROI. And then another gentleman here, Mike Ellery, he just simply said, we just don't have stockouts anymore. That was his biggest concern. Doesn't happen for him anymore. And so he's let us know that he really couldn't run the business without it. If we took it away, he would be in a world of hurt. So great feedback from our customers. So before I bring this to a conclusion, we're nearing the end here, and I appreciate, again, your time and attention. But before I conclude, I wanted to just share a couple of screenshots. I'm not going to bother to go actually into the live application. Be more than happy to schedule an individual session with you to fire up the app and talk about your specific needs and walk you through the application. I've got my contact information on the last slide when we get there, and our website has some really good content as well, some videos and product tours and so forth that are very helpful. But for our purposes today, I just wanted to share a couple of screens to give you a feel for the interface. So this is the initial dashboard that you would be presented with when you logged into your secure account. You may want to take just a second to take a look, but 6 really key performance indicators there. that really, again, give you that snapshot or a health check of your inventory. And underneath each of these different components, what my current stock holding is, where I have excess, where I have surplus orders on the way in the door, what are the top 5 SKUs in my inventory that are contributing to that problem. So again, exception-based approach, whereas as a buyer or planner looking at this first thing in the morning, I can see if I've got some surplus orders or below that, even the potential stock outs. I've got 5 items there that are going to potentially cost me some sales if I don't take some proactive action on it today. So I can look into each of these individual items. And if I solve those 5 today, tomorrow I get a fresh batch, the next day another fresh batch. And if I keep solving those top 5 most challenging issues that have the most impact financially on my business, and if I look at each of these different KPIs, I've got 5 for each. So if I spend my day maybe knocking down 5, 10, 15 of these items every day, and I have that discipline, before you know it, all those trends are going to be going into the right direction, right? So if you do that, you're going to have improved inventory performance, you're going to have improved profitability. And so I think, the key message here is awesome visibility with great drill down, functional drill down and drill around capability to get right to where the action is. Things are graphical, color coded, just kind of slap you in the face to say, hey, here's where you need to pay attention right now. And then, of course, some great embedded videos and tutorials and online chat, all available in the application right from this screen. So again, really built for the small, medium-sized company that's requiring ease of use, rapid navigation, but some real power and sophistication under the hood. This is a shot of what it would look like if we did drill into one of those inventory items. This is our item inquiry screen, and where, again, you see great visibility and a full understanding of how we got to where we are, how we calculated the safety stock, and what the status of this item is and what every item is in every warehouse location. We can see exactly what the forecast is, again, with some visual cues. You can see on the left there that this is classified as an AH item, in other words, an A item, a very important item from a value standpoint, but also an H item, meaning a high velocity or a fast moving item. So this is, upper right quadrant of my matrix, absolutely a critical bread and butter item to my organization. And if I'm at risk of running out of a product like this, I really need to take some action quickly, because this is a critical product for my business. So great access, again, visual cues, ability to drill in and understand more detail of what's going on. This is a quick view of our graphical forecasting. And again, this can be sliced and diced by different items. It can be from a top-down approach by product line or by supplier or for certain buyers in your organization. So lots of ways that, again, we get a graphical representation as well as a table of what does our historical activity look like and what does our future forecasted demand look like based on that historical activity and the algorithms that we apply to that forecast going forward. And then one final screen to show you here, just to give you a feel for our order scheduling tool. So again, as we talked about, the key purpose of all this analysis, all that number crunching and all that information that we provide is to get us to this point of creating the optimal order. And this is the environment that we do that, again, with great visual cues and lots of detail available if we need to drill in for further understanding. But basically, we're looking at all that data, making a recommendation as to what should be purchased. We allow, of course, the buyer planner to edit this information, manipulate it, play with it. Maybe you've got to top off a container that's coming from China or someplace, and you need to fill that container. You need to get to a certain level to get certain discounts on either shipping or cost discounts overall. All that is available and at the fingertips of the buyer planner from this one environment. And when you get it okay, you get it the way you want it, then you click a button here and it automatically creates the open purchase order in the accounting or ERP application that you're integrated to. So just a real quick high-level view of some key functionality and screens within the application to give you a sense of where we're going with this. So again, I think we've covered some pretty interesting information. We really appreciate our host today, Information Integration Group, for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to have this conversation with you. Clearly, they're a leader in their marketplace in this arena. They've been providing solutions for inventory management that fits their client needs for decades. I've known the owner of IIG for a long time. and they're a great organization, and I'm excited to be part of that team. In addition to their expertise and their great customer support in general for ERP and accounting applications, they certainly always are looking at top applications to add to the ERP or accounting environment. So we're excited that one of those applications that IIG really trusts is NetStock and Sage Inventory Advisor. And we're honored to have been able to present this stuff to you today. Hopefully you found it interesting. Hopefully it resonated, that some of the challenges that you're facing in your organization today and trying to manage this through a spreadsheet environment, makes sense. You're seeing yourself in that picture, and maybe you can see yourself in a future picture where you don't have to deal with that. We've kind of launched a campaign. I don't have it on this screen, but it's hashtag ditch the spreadsheets. And I think that's resonating with a lot of organizations that we talk to, that it's probably time. And many folks haven't realized that there was a better way, right? You use the tools that are available to you and that you know about, and you make the best of it. I think a big part of our message is that this is probably something new and exciting and different that many folks didn't realize was out there for small, medium-sized companies to be a very affordable optimization tool. So you see our contact information there. Janice Haywood is your point of contact at IIG, and there's her email. Then there's mine, russ@netstock.co. And as I mentioned, we've got a couple of websites that also have some great information associated with them. Netstock.co, and notice that's not .com, and then inventoryadvisor.co, which is more specific to the Sage environment. So with that, we'll conclude our presentation. The chat window is open. I should have mentioned that earlier if you had any specific questions. And I'll stay on the line here for a few more minutes to give you all an opportunity to ask any individual questions of me. If there's anything I can revisit or that I didn't cover that you have a concern about or a question about, happy to address that now. So if you click on your chat function within the GoToWebinar control panel, go ahead and type me a message and let me know what that might be. One of the questions that we often get, by the way, has to do with how long does it take to deploy an application like this? And we can certainly get you some more information. But I would say the typical environment is that we're looking at about 2 to 4 weeks is probably most common. Certainly we can go as fast as 2 weeks, but that's kind of pushing it. It's really more on the plate of the end user of your organization to decide how quickly you want to go. It's probably about 12 to maybe 20 hours worth of actual hours of work and training and learning and playing and testing and meetings with us and walking through the data and making sure that everything looks right and so forth. So typically we see that number of hours spread across about 4 weeks. Certainly more complex environments can go a little bit longer, but it's really designed to be, it's a remote implementation. We do it all remotely. We've got some great training videos, some great emails, online tutorials, and a built-in wiki, and all those tools that are there to help you. And then we are standing by. We schedule several specific sessions with the end users to make sure that we're reviewing the data, we're reviewing those first order schedules to make sure that everything is making sense and is understood, and that you're comfortable with the application. But that's typically what we're looking at. So I don't see any other questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude and wrap it up for today. Again, thank you for your time and attention. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up, and we'd be happy to chat with you. Thanks again.